The 1950s were not just another decade in American history. They were a feeling. A moment when optimism filled the air, highways stretched endlessly toward the horizon, and the automobile became more than transportation. It became identity. Back then, cars weren't designed simply to get you from point A to point B. They were designed to be noticed, to inspire pride, to make you slow down when one passed you on the street. Chrome was everywhere, curves were dramatic, and dashboards felt more like aircraft cockpits than car interiors. This was the golden age of American automotive design. But here's the part most people never talk about. Even during this golden era, not every great car succeeded. Some of the most beautiful, innovative, and daring automobiles of the 1950s completely failed in the marketplace. They weren't unreliable. They weren't poorly built. And they certainly weren't ugly. They failed because they were misunderstood. Too expensive, too different, or simply born at the wrong moment in history. Today, we're going back to that forgotten side of the 1950s to revisit stunning American cars that deserved success but never found it. And chances are, at least one of these was a dream car you once admired from afar. One of the boldest experiments of the decade came from a company most people never associate with Italian design. In 1954, Hudson Motor Company unveiled the Hudson Italia, a car that felt completely out of place in America at the time. Its body was handcrafted in Italy by Carrozzeria Touring, formed entirely from aluminum, with sleek European lines inspired by Alfa Romeo and Maserati. It looked exotic, refined, and sophisticated. Nothing like the boxy sedans filling American roads. Yet underneath that elegant skin was the humble chassis of the Hudson Jet, powered by a modest inline-six engine. Hudson believed American buyers were ready for a European-style Grand Tourer, but the market disagreed. The price was nearly $4,800, more than a Cadillac Eldorado, and buyers simply couldn't justify paying luxury car money for a small coupe with modest performance. Only 26 were ever built. Today, the Hudson Italia is considered a masterpiece, not because it failed, but because it dared to be something different long before Americans were ready to embrace that idea. Around the same time, Ford made a mistake that still fascinates historians today. Instead of competing with Cadillac using Lincoln, Ford created an entirely new luxury brand. It was called Continental, and its flagship was the Continental Mark II. This was not a flashy car. It had no tail fins, no excessive chrome, and no dramatic styling tricks. Instead, it focused on elegance, restraint, and craftsmanship. The interior featured genuine Scottish leather, hand-finished details, and standard air conditioning at a time when most cars didn't offer it at all. It was, in many ways, an American Rolls-Royce. The problem was the price. At nearly $10,000 in the mid-1950s, the Mark II cost as much as a house. Ford actually lost money on every single one sold. Even celebrities like Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra couldn't save it. Fewer than 3,000 were built before the brand quietly disappeared. Today, the Continental Mark II is admired as one of the finest luxury cars America ever produced, even if it arrived far too early. Then there was the Kaiser Darren, a car that looked like it rolled straight out of a European postcard. Introduced in 1954, it featured a fiberglass body, long, elegant lines, and one of the most unusual door designs ever used on an American production car. Instead of swinging outward, the doors slid forward into the front fenders. It was clever, dramatic, and unlike anything else on the road. In fact, it was America's first fiberglass sports car, beating the Corvette to market by a matter of months. Unfortunately, the performance didn't match the looks. Under the hood was a small inline-six producing just 90 horsepower. For a car that looked fast, it simply wasn't. Combined with a high price and Kaiser Motors' financial struggles, the Darren never had a real chance. Only 435 were produced, turning it into a brief but brilliant chapter in American automotive history. Chrysler, on the other hand, had no problem building powerful cars in the 1950s. The 1957 Chrysler 300C was one of the most formidable machines of its era. Powered by a 392 cubic inch Hemi V8, producing up to 375 horsepower, it could sprint from 0 to 60 in about 8 seconds, numbers that rivaled European sports cars of the time. But the 300C wasn't just about speed. It featured Virgil Exner's bold forward-look design, premium leather interiors, and a presence that blended performance with luxury. The issue wasn't the car itself. It was the audience. The price was nearly double that of a Chevrolet, and the buyer pool for a car that combined both luxury and high performance was extremely small in the 1950s. Fewer than 2,000 were sold. Today, the 300C is regarded as a muscle car in a tuxedo, respected far more now than it ever was in its own time. Not every failure came from being too expensive. Sometimes, it was about styling that challenged public taste. The Nash Airflight is a perfect example. Introduced in 1950, it featured an aerodynamic shape, enclosed rear wheels, and a smooth, rounded body that reduced drag and improved fuel efficiency. Technically, Nash was absolutely right. This was the future of automotive design. The interior was equally forward-thinking, with seats that folded flat into a bed, something almost unheard of at the time. But American buyers didn't want efficiency in the early 1950s. They wanted chrome, fins, and flash. To many, the Airflight looked strange, even awkward. Sales suffered, proving that being right too early can be just as dangerous as being wrong. Buick also learned that lesson with the 1953 Skylark. Built to celebrate Buick's 50th anniversary, the Skylark was lower, sleeker, and far more refined than standard Buicks. It featured a powerful nailhead V8, a handcrafted interior, and styling that felt closer to Cadillac than anything Buick had offered before. But buyers didn't know how to categorize it. It was priced far above other Buicks, yet still carried the Buick name rather than Cadillac's prestige. As a result, fewer than 1,700 were sold, and the Skylark quietly faded away, later becoming one of the most desirable Buicks ever built. By the late 1950s, Mercury attempted to leap into the future with the Turnpike Cruiser. This car was packed with technology that seemed unbelievable at the time, including push-button controls, automatic climate control, and a futuristic dashboard featuring a gyro-style speedometer. Its exterior was just as ambitious, with a floating roof and dramatic lighting elements. Mercury wanted to show the world what tomorrow would look like. Unfortunately, buyers found it overwhelming. It felt too complex, too strange, and too risky compared to familiar Ford and Chevrolet models. Despite respectable production numbers, the Turnpike Cruiser was quickly dropped and forgotten. Perhaps the most famous example of unrealized potential was the Lincoln Futura. Unveiled in 1955, it featured twin-bubble canopies, hidden headlights, and a spaceship-like interior that captured the public's imagination. Critics loved it, crowds admired it, but production was never realistic. The technology simply wasn't there yet. The single prototype eventually found a second life when it was transformed into the Batmobile, securing its place in pop culture history. Looking back at these cars today, it's hard not to feel a sense of loss. None of them failed because they were bad cars. They failed because they challenged expectations. They were too bold, too refined, or too advanced for the world they entered. In many ways, that's what makes them special. They remind us that innovation is rarely appreciated in its own time. Sometimes the most beautiful ideas are the ones that have to wait decades to be understood. So which one stood out to you? Was it the elegance of the Continental Mark II, the daring Hudson Italia, or the futuristic Lincoln Futura? Or is there another forgotten American classic you believe deserves recognition? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this journey back into the golden age of American design, don't forget to subscribe, because there are still many forgotten legends waiting to be rediscovered.